Imagine spending your whole life working hard, building memories in a home filled with love, only to find yourself in a place that feels nothing like home. I thought moving into a nursing home would bring comfort, safety, and a sense of belonging. But the reality, it was far from what I expected. Today, I want to share 6 hard truths I've learned, so you or your loved ones can make an informed decision before taking this step. Moving into a nursing home seemed like a logical choice at first. The promise of safety, medical care, and a community of people my age made it sound like a place where I could live comfortably. But nothing prepared me for the feeling of losing control over my own life. Before I moved here, I decided what time I woke up, what I wanted to eat, and how I spent my day. Now, every part of my daily routine is structured by someone else's schedule. Meals are served at set times, whether I'm hungry or not. Lights go out when they decide it's bedtime. Even something as simple as choosing what clothes to wear can be influenced by the caregivers. I never thought I'd feel so powerless over such basic decisions. It's not just about routines, it's about the deeper sense of self that gets stripped away. When I lived in my own home, I had purpose. I took care of things. I made choices that mattered. Here, everything is managed for me. If I want to go for a walk, I have to ask permission. If I want a snack outside of meal hours, I might be told to wait. These things seem small, but when you add them up, they make you feel like a child rather than an adult who has lived a full, independent life. Losing independence isn't just about the daily schedule, it affects how others see you, too. When you're in a nursing home, people assume you can't do things for yourself. Staff members, though well-meaning, sometimes talk to me as if I can't understand. They make decisions on my behalf without even asking what I want. Family members, once eager for my advice, now act as if my opinions don't matter. I used to be the person others relied on, and now I feel like a burden. I miss the simple things. Driving to the grocery store when I felt like it, choosing my own furniture, deciding what to cook for dinner. I miss being able to leave the house without filling out paperwork or waiting for an aide to escort me. These little freedoms were part of my identity, and without them, I feel like a version of myself that I don't recognize. It's a slow loss, one that chips away at your confidence and your sense of self-worth. When I first moved in, I told myself I'd at least have company. I imagined sitting with friends, sharing stories, and never feeling alone. But I quickly learned that loneliness can be even worse in a place filled with people. The reality is that not everyone is capable of forming friendships here. Many residents are struggling with illnesses, memory loss, or mobility issues that make socializing difficult. Conversations are often short, and some days, I go hours without speaking to anyone in a meaningful way. I remember walking into the common area one afternoon, hoping to join a group playing cards. They were friendly, but the conversation felt forced, like everyone was just going through the motions. It wasn't like the friendships I had before, where we'd laugh for hours over dinner or take spontaneous trips. Here, relationships are fleeting. People come and go, and sometimes they don't come back. It's a heartbreaking reality that no one warns you about. I thought my family would visit more often, but life gets busy for them. At first, they called and visited regularly, but over time, the visits became less frequent. I don't blame them. Everyone has responsibilities, but that doesn't make it any less painful. I sit by the window, watching cars pull up, hoping one of them brings someone I know. When they do visit, it's wonderful, but there's always that feeling of sadness when they leave, knowing I'll go back to my routine of waiting for the next visit. Loneliness here isn't just about missing family or friends. It's the feeling of being surrounded by people but not truly connecting with anyone. It's sitting in a room full of residents, yet feeling invisible. It's longing for deep conversations, laughter, and the feeling of belonging that once came so easily. I never realized how much I'd miss spontaneous interactions, the neighbor stopping by to chat, the friend calling just to check in, the unexpected encounters at the grocery store. In my own home, I had control over my social life. I could invite people over, go out when I wanted, and choose who I spent my time with. Now, my interactions depend on the schedules of caregivers, family members, or other residents who may or may not feel up for talking that day. I often find myself reminiscing about the days when I felt truly seen and valued. I don't say this to complain but to share the truth about what life in a nursing home can really be like. It's not always the warm, social environment that brochures advertise. The reality is that the loss of independence and the unexpected loneliness can take a toll in ways I never imagined. If I had known these things before, I might have thought harder about whether this was the right choice for me. Best possible care. After all, that's what these places are designed for. I expected attentive staff, quick responses to my needs, and a sense of security that I wouldn't have had if I were living alone. But it didn't take long for me to realize that the quality of care isn't always what you'd hope for. The first few weeks were eye-opening. I quickly noticed that the staff was stretched thin, constantly rushing from one task to another. They were polite, but I could see the exhaustion on their faces. When I pressed my call button, I never knew how long it would take for someone to come. Sometimes it was a few minutes, other times it was half an hour or more. I didn't want to be a bother, but I also didn't want to feel like I was invisible. Simple requests, like needing help getting out of bed or asking for a glass of water, sometimes felt like I was asking for too much. I remember one evening, I dropped my blanket on the floor and couldn't reach it. It was a small thing, but it made me realize how much I depended on the staff. I pressed the button, waited, pressed it again, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, someone came. By then, I had already given up and tried to sleep without it. It's not that the staff doesn't care. Many of them are kind and hardworking. But they are overwhelmed, juggling too many responsibilities, trying to care for too many residents at once. It's heartbreaking to watch because I know they want to do better, but there simply aren't enough hands to go around. Medications are given on schedule, but I've seen mix-ups happen. One evening, I was given the wrong dosage, and if I hadn't double-checked, I would have taken something that wasn't meant for me. Meals arrive at set times, but there's little flexibility. If I'm not hungry when dinner is served, I either eat it anyway or go to bed hungry. And when something is wrong, a sore that needs attention, a pain that won't go away, I don't always feel like I'm being heard right away. The biggest reality check came when I started noticing how some residents faded into the background. The ones who didn't speak up, who didn't have family advocating for them, were often the last to get attention. If you don't insist on being noticed, you might go unnoticed. That's a terrifying feeling when you're relying on others for your well-being. What makes this even harder to accept is the cost. Nursing homes aren't cheap. Before moving in, I had spent my life saving money, thinking I was preparing for a secure future. But the bills here are staggering. Every little thing costs more than you'd expect. Need extra assistance? That's an added charge. Require a special diet? That might come with a fee. Even small conveniences, like having your laundry done more often, can add up quickly. I used to think that paying more meant receiving better care. But I've come to learn that's not always true. I know people here who pay more than I do, yet they face the same struggles, long wait times, rushed caregivers, and a feeling of being just another number in the system. I've done the math, and the amount of money I've spent in just 1 year could have covered in-home care for much longer than I expected. Had I known what I do now, I might have looked at other options before making this choice. It's frustrating because I don't mind paying for quality care, I just wish I was getting what I thought I was paying for. Instead, I watch my savings shrink while dealing with the same frustrations day after day. And the worst part is knowing that if my money runs out, my options will become even more limited. I never thought I'd have to worry about financial stability at this stage in my life. I worked hard, planned ahead, and tried to be responsible. But nursing homes are a business, and like any business, profit comes first. I've seen it firsthand. Budget cuts leading to fewer staff members, cheaper food options, and less attention to the small things that make a difference in daily life. I used to believe that moving into a nursing home would bring peace of mind, but instead, it has introduced new worries I never expected. It's not just about the care itself, it's about knowing that every single day, I am paying for a level of service that doesn't always meet the promises that were made. That realization is one of the hardest things to accept. One of the hardest things about living in a nursing home is the feeling of emotional neglect. People assume that because we are surrounded by staff and other residents, we must feel supported, but the truth is far from that. There's a difference between being looked after physically and being cared for emotionally. I never realized how much I would miss the warmth of genuine human connection until it became a rarity. In my own home, I had people who truly knew me, neighbors who would stop by just to chat, friends who would call simply because they were thinking of me. Here, most interactions feel transactional. The caregivers are focused on tasks, bringing meals, administering medications, helping with daily routines, but there's little time for real conversation. They are polite, but always in a hurry, moving on to the next resident before any meaningful connection can be made. Even when family visits, the conversations don't feel the same. I see it in their eyes, the struggle to find the right words, the discomfort of being in a place they know I don't want to be. They ask how I'm doing, and I smile, saying I'm fine because I don't want to burden them with my true feelings. I don't tell them how lonely it gets, how I go entire days without feeling like anyone really sees me. I don't want them to feel guilty, but inside, I long for the days when our conversations were effortless, when I was more than just an elderly relative they had to check in on. There's an unspoken sadness in places like this. Some residents stop talking altogether, not because they don't have anything to say, but because they feel like no one is truly listening. I've seen people sit in their chairs, staring out the window for hours, their minds lost in memories of a life they no longer have. It's heartbreaking, and some days, I worry I'm becoming one of them. Holidays are the hardest. I used to love the excitement of decorating my home, the laughter of family filling the rooms, the smell of home-cooked meals. Now, holidays are reduced to a scheduled event in the common area, where decorations feel impersonal and the festivities lack the warmth they once had. I appreciate the effort, but it's not the same. The joy feels forced, and when the event is over, we all return to our rooms, feeling the emptiness even more. But the hardest part of all is the constant reminder of mortality. Before I moved here, I knew that life had an end, but I didn't think about it every day. Now, it's impossible to ignore. People I've had meals with, people I've shared stories with, suddenly aren't there anymore. At first, you ask what happened, but after a while, you stop asking because you already know. The goodbyes aren't always spoken, sometimes, they just happen. It changes how you see time. Every morning, I wake up knowing that another day has passed, another friend may be gone, another piece of the familiar may have disappeared. I try to stay strong, to focus on the present, but the reality is always there. It makes you reflect on your own life in ways you never expected. You start wondering if you've done enough, if the people you love know how much they mean to you, if you've left behind something meaningful. I never thought I'd spend these years surrounded by so much loss. In my own home, I could distance myself from it, but here, it's part of the daily routine. The empty chairs at the dining hall, the rooms suddenly vacated, the staff trying not to talk about it too much because they don't want to upset the residents. But we all know, we feel it. I don't say all of this to sound hopeless. I still find moments of joy, small ones, like a letter from an old friend, a song playing on the radio that brings back good memories. But the truth is, nothing prepares you for this reality. If I had known, I might have fought harder to stay in my own home for as long as possible. I might have made different choices. Because the hardest part of living in a nursing home isn't just the loss of independence, or the loneliness, or even the quality of care. It's realizing that this is where the final chapter of life is unfolding, and you have no choice but to turn the pages, one by one.